Hey, this is Chris Jericho, and you are listening to Inside the Ropes. It's every Thursday night, and you better listen or I will come find you. I know where you live. I have Google Earth.
Welcome back to Inside the Ropes. Now, we've said that he's coming. We've said that he's coming back to reclaim what's his, and the he that we were talking about was, of course, the lead singer for Fozzy. He is Mongoose McQueen. He's a multi-time world heavyweight champion, the Ayatollah of rock and roller, the highlight of the night, the man of many names, 1,004 holds. It is none other than Chris Jericho. Chris, welcome to Inside the Ropes.
Hey man, how's it going?
Chris, I guess the first question I've got for you is, you're coming back to the UK to tour with Fozzy later on this month, with Sin and Bones. What would you say for people who haven't heard the new album, it's like compared to the previous albums like All That Remains?
I think that that after we did Chasing the Grail, we really kind of focused in and figured out what it is that Fozzy does best and who we are, and that's a very heavy band with very melodic choruses, almost like if Metallica and Journey had a bastard child, it would sound like Fozzy. So we really focused in on doing that with Sin and Bones and doing, you know, a really cohesive record in feel and in vibe and in tone that kind of stuck to those guidelines, and that's what we did. And the record has just gone over huge since it came out. It's the highest charting record we've ever had, the fastest selling record we've ever done. So it's good to know that when you put a lot of time and effort into doing an album, and we always thought it was our best song. We thought it was our best record that we'd ever done. And then when you hear the reactions and the reviews and the fans, when people feel the same way, it's very gratifying.
One of the things that interested me was, as a performer, you've been in a WrestleMania, which in front of 80,000 fans, and then you've also performed with Fozzy at the Download Festival. What is the main difference of performing in front of such a big crowd, but in terms of doing it with Fozzy or doing it in wrestling?
There really is a difference. I mean, a big crowd is a big crowd, There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of a vibe, and also, too, I mean, a lot of times when you perform in front of crowds that big, the volume of the crowd tends to get lost. I mean, if you're doing, Download, which is outdoors, stadium, with WrestleMania, which is usually, open air, outdoors as well, the sound tends to travel up and out rather than on the stage or into the ring. So it's kind of weird because sound travels. Where if you're playing, in an arena or a smaller venue like that, you can hear more of the exact reactions of what the people are doing. So it's great to play in front of big crowds, but you have to know how to handle them for sure.
Obviously, you made your return to pro wrestling this year as well. And in 2007, when you went back to wrestling, you'd said on your DVD that part of the reason you came back was seeing the Shawn Michaels-John Cena match in London, and that had been a factor and you want to kind of come back. What was it this time round that made you want to get back in the ring?
Mostly it was the fans. I mean, when I came back in 2007, that was for me because I felt like I still had something to prove. I felt like I still had some work to do to kind of cement who I was as a performer and cement my legacy, I guess you'd say. I think I did that. I think 2008 was the best year of my career with the Shawn Michaels feud. And then following 2009 was the Rey Mysterio feud. I think those are the two best feuds I'd ever had. And the work that I did, the matches I had, the character that I played, I think was probably the strongest. So when I went back in 2010, it was just for the fans. When I went back in 2012 this year, it was for the fans more than anything, because everybody was always asking, when are you going to go back? Please come back. Please come back. And we were doing Sin and Bones, and when you record a record, you have like 6 months off basically, because I sing my parts and then I'm done. So it was a good time to go back, and it was a great run. I really enjoyed it. I had a great idea to do something with Punk, which I thought worked out great, and it was a really cool 6 months, and actually a little bit longer, even probably closer to 8 months. And then when it was done, when Sin and Bones came out, it was time to go back on the road with Fozzy, and that's kind of my focus from now on. It has been that way for the last 3 years. Fozzy first, and everything else kind of falls into place after that, depending on the schedule of the band. So, maybe when we do the next record, I'll go back to the WWE for a few months again, but I'll never go back on a full-time basis. I have too many other things going on right now, and, kind of moving on to the next phase of my life.
Yeah, and I wonder as well, when you came back this time and you did the vignettes with the end of the world as you know it and the little boy, what was the kind of idea behind that? Was that was a lot of that your kind of creative input?
Yeah, it was just my input because the Mayans are saying that the world is going to end in 2012. So I just thought that'd be a cool thing. The world is the end of the world as you know it, and that was basically me coming back to reclaim what was mine, which was the title of the best in the world, which I had been using for years, and then when I left Punk started using it, I just thought, well, there's an interesting story that you could tell. And just thought the vignettes would kind of be a cool, Jericho-esque way to come back, like this very cryptic, interesting way to come back, and it's kind of what I do. I did it the previous few times that I came into the WWE, so I just thought I'd continue along those lines and do something different, something a little bit darker, which tied into this end of the world thing, which tied into Jericho coming back to reclaim what it is. It's basically just paraphrasing what the Mayans are saying,
Yeah, it's funny, I remember watching the Raw when you came back, and when you came out and did the thing where you went round the ring and then you left, and I think everyone was kind of like, oh, we want more. I guess that was kind of the point, to kind of leave people wanting more.
That was totally the point. It was actually Vince's idea to have me come out and not say anything, because, I knew that I would come back, and because I'd been gone for a while, that people would be cheering me because I was a heel, because I was, cheering me because I'd been gone for so long. So I knew instantly I'd come back and be a babyface. So I thought, well, what's the best way to take away, something that the people want? They like this character, so they want to hear this character speak. What if I just don't talk? And that was actually Vince's idea, and it worked out really well to the point where it's like, well, how about I just don't talk for like the whole month I'm there or whatever? And that's kind of what we did.
And when you came back on Raw and it was in Memphis, there was pictures that had leaked out on the internet earlier on that day of you at Nashville Airport. And then later on in 2012, at WrestleMania weekend, it leaked out on the internet that Brock Lesnar was in talks with the WWE. How do you feel about, obviously the casual fans are still going to see these things as surprises because they don't read the internet, but in terms of some people posting these things online and maybe spoiling it for some fans, do you think that's got a big effect on wrestling now?
I think that people feel entitled nowadays because of the internet. They feel that they have the right to know everything before it happens. And in Memphis, and have people at the airport see me around in Nashville, which is like 250 miles. Are you really going to make that connection? Like, I could have just been in Nashville, or I could have been in freaking Knoxville, or I could have been in Atlanta. And I think people would have said, oh, it's Jericho, it's Jericho, it's Jericho. So, in a way, it increases fan reaction, because, like I said, some guy was waiting in Nashville to see if I would show up. And it was funny because that picture of me standing there, it suddenly, I don't remember exactly why it happened, but I think people started kind of superimposing that picture to, like, I was walking across Abbey Road with the Beatles, and I was standing at the JFK assassination, and I was, standing at the pyramids of Egypt, just all these really funny things of like, oh, Jericho's here, because I think a lot of people were like, okay, so you saw Jericho in Nashville, so that obviously means he's on Raw. I saw Jericho on the cover of Abbey Road, that means he's on Raw. It was like this whole viral thing of just this dumb picture of me that was going everywhere, which is pretty funny. But, I don't think it spoils anything. I think if you don't want to read spoilers or whatever, don't go online. But I also think that a lot more people think that there's a lot more people going online than there really is. I think there's maybe a small percentage of the fans that watch every week that are going online to read all the backstories. Same amount of fans that will read Billboard magazine if you're a musician, or will read, Variety magazine if you're an actor. I think there's an element of that behind-the-scenes thing that people always like, but I think the majority of people could really give a shit, just want to watch it unfold the way that it unfolds. That's the way I am. If I go to a movie, I don't want to know the ending before it happens, or I don't want to know the plot twist before it happens. I just want to see it the way that it's meant to be seen.
And you mentioned as well that you had the idea to work with Punk, and you came back, and it was a bit of a different role for you this time round because you were the veteran in the storyline with Punk. And how does that stack up in your mind with your other rivalries with like Shawn Michaels in 2008 or The Rock about a decade ago? How does that stack up with those rivalries for you?
I don't really see it that way. I mean, I don't really see it. I mean, it's cool that people think that, but like I said, I think the work that I did over the last 4 or 5 years is better than the work I did the first 14 or 15 years that I was working. So, maybe legend to some, but to me, just a guy that was just kind of at the peak of his career, just working his ass off like I always do. I think that feud was a great feud. I think that I don't think it could match up to the Shawn Michaels feud of 2008. I don't think anything could ever match up to that. But I think it's right up there with the Rey Mysterio feud with the Rock in 2002, with Michaels in 2003. Especially since it was a curveball feud. We had a completely different thing planned that Vince decided on not doing last minute, so we kind of had to come up with a whole different vibe with the the alcoholic thing and all that sort of deal. So I just think it was really well done. I think the match went really, really good. I think it was a great match. I think that it was kind of overshadowed a bit by the Rock and Cena build-up, but I think as a match it was better than Rock and Cena. I think it was a solid second of that WrestleMania. Obviously, I think the Taker match stole the show, as any Taker match pretty much does at this point in time. But I think, I had my show-stealing match at WrestleMania in 2003. We tried our hardest to do that again in 2012, but Taker versus Triple H with Shawn involved, pretty hard to stack up to. So I'll take the silver medal in that WrestleMania and be happy with it, be proud of it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And in WCW, probably your most famous feud was with Dean Malenko, and there's so much stuff that you did during that when you were in Washington, or when you had the framed picture of him in the ring, or reading out the holds. What are your memories of that rivalry?
Well, Dean was so smooth. That's one thing you forget because he hasn't worked in so long. But whenever you watch old tapes of him, he's probably the smoothest performer I'd ever seen, and great ideas in putting together matches. And that was another kind of probably a forgotten amazing feud in my career, was the 1998 Malenko Jericho, because we worked together so many times, and I don't think we ever had a bad match. There was one pay-per-view that didn't go the way we wanted it to, but other than that, every match was just better than the last. The story was great too, and Dean was gone for 2 or 3 months, and I carried that whole storyline on my back by myself because nobody gave a shit. There wasn't any writers back then or anybody doing anything to help. It was all just my ideas and just being on my own and just being creative and just basically getting things through the cracks because nobody really paid any attention to what I was doing. And that's one of the proudest feuds of my career was versus Malenko, and some of the best work that I ever had. I don't think I've ever watched any of those matches back. I'm not a big fan of watching my old matches, but if I ever did sit down and watch one of those ones, especially there was one from San Antonio, which I think was, they promoted it as the final fight, the final Jericho-Malenko match, and I think that one was probably one of the best ones. But all of that stuff was just organic, and Dean and I had great chemistry. We came from the same background and had a lot of respect for each other, and had, obviously nobody could ever beat the chemistry that Malenko and Guerrero had, or the chemistry that me and Benoit had, but whenever you mixed any of the four of us together, you always had amazing matches. And Dean and I just had a great story to go along with it, so it was a really, really cool time for me, for sure.
And one thing that I think was quite shocking for me anyway, when I read your second book, Undisputed, that I don't know if there's any other way to say it, but you had to kind of eat quite a lot of shit from Vince McMahon at the beginning of your time there, when he had said that he didn't know if you were worth your contract and stuff like that. And I just wondered, was that quite difficult to kind of take that?
Of course it's difficult to take that, especially since I didn't agree with him. It was just a tough transition to go into WWE from WCW when there were so many things I just didn't know because nobody really taught us anything in WCW. And obviously Japan and Mexico is a completely different world when you're working over there. And also too, I came in, they're really, people don't understand. If you talk about the Monday Night Wars and this, there really was a war. I mean, the companies really did have a problem with each other, and I came in from the enemy territory with a big build-up, with a big contract, and with a lot of pomp and circumstance on my end. I definitely wasn't coming in being the polite sheep. I had opinions and I had thoughts too, but coming into the new world and not knowing as much as I thought that I knew, or at least as much as I thought I needed to know about the style of working in WWE, I probably could have toned down the way that I did things too. So looking back, I probably deserved it. Not as much as I got, but I probably deserved 50% of what I got, and the other 50% is just the wrestling business. But like I said, I'd been around for 9 years at that point. I knew how the business worked. I'd also been over in every country in the world, so I knew how to get over, and I knew no matter what was put in front of me, I could figure out a way to make it good and figure out a way to get over with it. And you got to do that starting with the fans, starting with the guys that you work with that are your peers. And that's how I eventually got over. Fans knew that I worked hard every night. And if guys like, Triple H didn't like me so much, guys like Bob Holly did and JBL did. And that's how you get over in the locker room, is with the lower guys, the mid guys, the workhorses. And then that kind of permeates through to the entire company. And that's what I did. I had no intention of ever quitting. I had no intention of ever leaving. And even when Vince said he was going to fire me, it's like, well, fuck, if he fires me, then I'll just figure out what to do. But I'm not going to give up. And you know, that's just, there's a movie called The Big Lebowski. It's a great quote where it's like, that's just your opinion, man. And that's the way I felt. It's like, if you really feel that way, well, that's just your opinion, man, because I don't feel that way. And I know that I'm not what you're saying that I am. And if you have self-confidence, that's the most important thing. Obviously, my confidence was shaken, and I was really second-guessing myself. But, you know, you're dealing with the first 2 years of a decorated, storied 12-year career with the WWE. So it wasn't even the first 2 years. It was probably just the first year. There was some real growing pains there, but once I figured out what I needed to do, as I knew I would, then it was smooth sailing from there. And that was really cemented in 2007, which is why I wanted to go back. I think that's when I became the, you know, quote-unquote legend that you say some people think I am, and that's when I became a real viable main event money-making performer in Vince's eyes, for sure.
And one of the things early on in your career that was quite a shocking thing that happened was when you beat Triple H for the WWE title in Penn State, and it was, you know, he got it back in the same night, but the fans went insane when you won that belt. How far in advance did you know that was going to happen, and was there ever talk of you sort of holding on to it for a while?
No, I remember the week before I had lost to Viscera on Sunday Night Heat, and I was like, this is it. I was pissed off. I was ready to quit. And I showed up that day, and I talked to one of the writers, and I was like, listen, man, I'm going to go see Vince because I'm done. This is bullshit. And at that point, I wanted to go. It wasn't someone telling me that. I was like, you know, I'm not doing anything here. And then the guy goes, well, you might want to wait before you go talk to him. I said, why? Because you're going to win the title tonight. I'm like, what? How? Like, are you joking? And that was, I think it was a kind of a litmus test to see what the crowd would do. And in retrospect, I think maybe had Vince known they were going to act that way, he might not have done what he did, as far as, you know, having me lose later on that night and this and everything. But it was the first test that I had that I passed with flying colors, not only for Vince, but with Triple H as well. It's like I went out there and really had a fucking great match, and that was the first time I think I'd ever had a great match in the WWE, especially at that level. And so even though I lost the title, quote unquote, lost it that night, I really was the big winner in the end, because that's what led to me and Triple H's last man standing match, and you know, just one thing led to another at that point. That was the real kind of coming of age, you know, congratulations, you passed the test moment was that match. So, you know, wrestling is not about winning or losing. It's about making the most of the opportunities that you have, and I definitely did that night. It was a great night, and it's fun to watch that match because people don't really react like that anymore. It was still a different time back in 2002. They hadn't seen as much as they have nowadays, and there was a brand new guy that had 10 years of experience. You know what I mean? And nobody is like that anymore. Nobody has 10 years of experience and comes in as the new guy. So it really was a cool moment in time, for sure.
And then the next year you would go on to do something that, you know, you can go to your grave claiming that you main evented WrestleMania. You were the last match on the card with Triple H. And, you know, you've spoken publicly about how you thought that Rock and Hogan should have probably been the main event in that card. And you also talked about how Stephanie and you as a unit didn't really work out that well. Did you know at the time, going into that match, that the Stephanie Jericho unity wasn't really working?
It's not that it didn't work out that well. It just didn't have the right dynamic. I mean, we were business partners where I thought if we were like, you know, lovers that had an affair behind Triple H's back, it would have been a better dynamic. So, you know, I think that point in time, it was okay. It wasn't as good as it could have been. It wasn't bad, but it was okay. And that happens sometimes. I mean, you know, that whole WrestleMania, you know, it was main event, quote unquote, but the main event was Rock and Hogan, let's be honest. And the only thing is they didn't go on last, we did. And I think it hurt the match that we didn't go on last. I think in retrospect, it would have been much better if we would have went on before them. But, you know, it still was good. And, you know, sometimes you do things that are great. Sometimes you do things that are bad. Sometimes you do things that are good. I think that was good. It was a solid, you know, 7 out of 10.
Going forward, obviously, you're going to continue to make Fozzy your number one priority with music. I've got to ask, in terms of wrestling, you know, you've sort of done it all. What's left for you in wrestling that you would like to do? Is there anything? Challenge the Undertaker's streak at WrestleMania? Is there anything you'd like to do?
Honestly, there really isn't. I mean, there really isn't anything left to do as far as, challenges or goals or watermarks or whatever. I've never won a Royal Rumble, but I don't care. I've had pivotal roles in Royal Rumbles that are still far beyond winning. I mean, last year was right to the end. I think in 2003 I was in it for like 45 minutes. But yeah, I've been the world champion 6 times. I've had the best match at WrestleMania. I've had feuds of the year, matches of the year. Proved to my peers that anybody that didn't think I was quote unquote good enough, I proved them wrong. Anybody that thought that I was quote unquote good enough, I proved them right. So there's really nothing left for me to do in wrestling, other than to help the younger guys. But that's not really a mission. That's just something that I would do if I was there anyways. So if I never had another match again, I could honestly say that I walked away on my own terms and had the most amazing career that some people think is one of the best careers ever. So, anytime you see a list of top 10 guys and I'm on it, that's pretty cool to see.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, man. See you soon.